Welcome to the Being Champions podcast. In this podcast, we'll unlock and discover the key elements that defines being a champion coach and dive into the principles that create a culture where everyone thrives and wants to be a part of. Okay, we would like to welcome everyone back to the Being Champions podcast. I'm really excited because we're back in the Cougar Vision studio. I got Jared and Mike to my left over here. And guys, a couple episodes ago, I had a great conversation with Betsy Butter, and we kind of dove into Gen Z and talking about the new characteristics of Gen Z and the best strategies and tips to work with this new generation of athletes. And one of the things that really struck from that conversation was looking at leadership styles and understanding like this old command and control style really doesn't work with this new generation. I mean, with the access to information, they need to know why. We talked a lot about this whole idea of co-creating and collaboration and coming together and doing this as a team. So that kind of led me into this conversation about connection and understanding why it is so important to connect with our athletes, right? And so that's kind of where I wanted to take this conversation, is this whole concept of transforming from being this command and control to more transformational and inviting our kids into this story and connecting better with them.
Absolutely. What are your thoughts?
My initial thoughts is just thinking about this whole concept and thinking about human nature, right? And understanding that everyone wants to feel like they are seen, they are heard, they are valued, they feel like they belong, right? And understanding like we have to spend the time, the energy to connect with our kids beyond just being the player. So wanted to talk about that today is just how do we build these relationships? How do we build this connection? And how do we get away from just looking at outcomes and results?
Yeah, I mean, I'll lead it off and thinking about connection, and just kids today have so much access to everything that they're connected to tons of stuff all the time. And so I think that there's a little bit of a paradox with connection, because in the coaching world, we talk a lot about figuring out ways that we can connect to our athletes better, have the relationships so that we can understand where they're coming from, how they're approaching things, what they're struggling with, what they're, thinking about, all of those things, so that we can have a better approach of how to connect so that they can understand what we're asking for, so that we can better paint the picture of, what we're trying to achieve in a practice, or what we need them to do in the classroom, or what we need them to do in the matches. And on the flip side, they're super connected in everything with their phones and their laptops and, everything being at their fingertips, so they understand what connection is. It's just finding that bridge to cross the gap of getting them to want to have connection in an environment that is asking them to do things maybe a specific way, or buy into a specific kind of culture, or build a specific kind of trust, so that we can do something together that's going to be more powerful than individually. So I think it's tricky because they understand connection, but they don't understand connection. It's all depending on what we're asking to have connection with. Right. And it's tough, but it's so important.
And what about thinking it from a coaching landscape? Why do you think there's sometimes a resistance for coaches to spend the time to actually connect with our kids, understanding the value of connection? So why do you think we have a disconnect from the coach to the player?
Yeah, it's also the same thing in the classroom with the teacher to the student as well. And I think it goes back to, you are vulnerable when you give up control.
Yeah.
And it comes back to that. And so many of us don't want to be vulnerable because we think it makes us less of a coach, less of a teacher. So I know it was tough to give that up when I was like that. I've been coaching for 65 years now.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It grows every week, Michael. It grows every week.
43 I coached for, but although I still developed relationships, but I definitely was a command coach.
Yeah.
You're going to do it this way, my way, the highway kind of deal.
Yeah.
But the more that you can create trust from yourself, for the coach to the player to the coach, then the coach can have that trust in his players to be able to communicate with them, to involve them in decision making. And to know that being vulnerable actually creates more of a connection than the old command control kind of thing, because that separates you. It puts you on a pedestal and it puts them under you.
Yeah.
And this way, you getting them to buy in and be a part of it, and you're working together. So I think it all comes down to that idea of us actually being vulnerable and admitting, hey, let's work together here, or I made a mistake, or Jonathan Swift has a great quote. He said, "A man should never be ashamed to own that he's been in the wrong. It is but saying that he's wiser today than he was yesterday." Yeah. So it's actually a good thing if you look at it that way. We just have to change how we look at things, change our perspective. Yeah. All comes back to that. Stand on the desk, see things from a different way, and that's how you make those connections. You see it from their way.
Yeah.
Okay. And like Jared said too, they have difficulty connecting face to face.
Yeah.
That's the tough thing.
Yeah.
Like you said, they're connected to so many other things, but the face to face is what's lacking. And so we can give them that by including them in the decision making process.
Yeah. I love it. And it reminds me one of the things that Betsy said is it's not impossible, right? It's simply unpracticed. So when you say face-to-face conversations, like our kids are not used to that because everything is through the phone. And I don't know. I mean, one of the things I hear a lot is, they talk about Gen Z and they say Gen Z is so soft, right? These kids are so soft these days. So if I'm a coach and I'm working on these soft skills, I'm making the kids even softer, right? And not understanding that these soft skills, building these strategies, building these soft skills are actually going to make us able to coach our kids harder. Right, it's
paradox again.
Yeah, it's the big paradox of, if we teach soft skills, it's going to make the kids soft. No, when you teach soft skills, right, we're developing a relationship where we can actually coach our kids harder. So, how do we get our kids, our coaches, to get away from this mindset of not always just going to the hardware, but how do we work on the software?
Yeah, I mean, to add to what you're both talking about here, I'm about halfway through. Patrick Lencioni's The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Yeah. And there's a perfect quote that relates exactly to what we're talking about. And it says, "Remember, teamwork begins by building trust. And the only way to do that is to overcome our need for invulnerability."
Yes.
It's like once we are willing to be vulnerable, the trust can be formed, the connection can then be bonded, and now we can talk about things that actually are going to help us move forward and make a big difference.
Yeah. So walk me through that, guys. I mean, you hear Hibbs has been coaching for 65 years, 43 years. Jared, all the stuff that you do within your environment, like what are some tips and strategies you have for our listeners and our coaches? Like how do you, within your environment, ensure that you're actually building connections, that everyone I don't care if they're the star player or the last guy on the bench, how do we make sure every kid feels like they are seen, they're heard, they're valued, and they belong?
The first thing that comes to my mind is just intention, and making sure that it's a super intentional step from me each and every day to address the team, not in just the mannerism of being the guy that's telling them what to do, but the first piece in the embracing and the embodiment of what we stand for as a team within our culture. Within our standards, within the environment that we try and create every day. Because with those pieces, we can create vulnerability, but comfort within that vulnerability. Yeah. And so we get players to have more trust and buy-in because we're addressing every single player's value. And they're comfortable being themselves in the environment because they know it's a space that we're encouraging it to be that way in. Yeah. And so, players get comfortable. We can then challenge them more, we can push them harder, and we can demand things from them because they know the space that it's coming from. Yeah. It's not coming from here are your orders, go and fulfill them or else. Instead, it's, hey guys, if we can understand these things together, if we can embrace one another, if we can buy into this all together, then when we move forward, this force, this intensity, this understanding is going to be far greater than it would have been if it was just 3 or 4 or 5 guys that are buying into this and 3 or 4 or 5 guys that are buying into that. It has to be cohesive.
Yeah.
And so I think the biggest thing is just being intentional, making sure that you're addressing all of your players and that they all have value, and that they all have something to add.
Yeah.
They all have something to add to the picture, whether it's a starter that's going to be scoring a bunch of points or a teammate that's going to be pushing the group and holding the standard anytime anybody has a hard time with any dip or you name it. But it's a collective. Everything has to be team. Everything has to be we. Everything has to be about us.
Yeah.
Because guys love to be a part of something. They love to be connected, especially if they feel like they have a voice.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I would say that it's the coach's responsibility for them to understand that they have to believe that you are really selling we.
Yeah.
And it's not really about you.
Yeah.
Right. I remember, talking to my son who played for me for many years, and he played for another coach. And I was hard on him. So he obviously had it tougher than a lot of kids on the team. And yet when I asked him, hey, how did you like playing for this other guy? He said, well, Dad, when I played for you, I always knew it wasn't about you.
Yeah.
And when I played for him, I always knew it was. And that team was very, very much more successful than any of my teams that Will played on.
Yeah.
And so, just saying that. And like you said, too, it's all about like trying something new. Remember we posed that to the coaches?
Yeah.
When was the last time you tried something new?
Yeah.
I think so many coaches just stay in their lane and do what they've been doing, even though they ask their players every day to go outside their comfort zone.
Yep.
So
Exactly.
I challenge our coaches to go outside their comfort zone, try something new each practice, each day. And it doesn't have to be something grand and huge, but like I love the thing, with Jerry and John about, R.I.V.E.R and rule of one. I mean, I use that all the time now.
Yeah.
And those things, the R.I.V.E.R effect makes people buy into we.
Yeah.
Because everybody feels relevant, inspired, valued, empowered, respected.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what does it. But like you said, Jared, you have to be intentional about that because it's not something natural, and it's also out of the X and O kind of strategy that we all like to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, hearing you talk, Mike, and hearing Jared talk, my wheels are spinning, and I hear I like to use, and I brought it up to you guys a couple weeks ago, just talking about coaching is like being a scientist, and we're doing mini experiments every single day, right? And we have to be willing to fail in the experiment. But again, like you said, it's like, when was the last time we tried something new? So we have to change our approach as far as how are we communicating with our kids. Because as coaches, I feel like we're really great. We love to talk. We love to tell, right? But we don't ask enough questions. And there's this technique that I love that I learned from Stephen Rolnick, and it's called Motivational Interviewing. And it talks about the rule, like the acronym RULE. So if you're looking at the rule, we're talking about resist telling our kids what to do. The U stands for understanding their motivation. L is listen with empathy. And then the E is an empower them. So when I say that rule, like, what do you guys think about with that whole concept and how we can better become listeners and not always telling our kids what to do?
Yeah, I mean, what immediately comes to mind is you give your group a voice.
Yeah.
So much of the time, I think as coaches, we feel like it's our responsibility to be the voice and the only voice. And the determination of whether a team is going to be great or not is their ability to listen and follow instructions. And
very true.
There are times when they can listen, follow instructions, and achieve great things. But there are other times where they do not understand what you're delivering. You are unwilling to listen to them.
Yep.
They no longer have a voice. And now we are at a crossroads where we have no clue where we're going. We have no clue what's going to happen in practice tomorrow. We have no clue what coach is looking for because he's frustrated with us. We're frustrated with him. We're maybe not very comfortable with understanding how we're supposed to deliver the next thing. And now we've got this friction that's solvable, but it comes back to the connection piece. We have to make sure that our players feel comfortable enough to come to us and say, Coach, we don't get this, or Coach, can you re-explain this? There has to be interaction, and it has to be mutually beneficial, but it has to be mutually respected. We're not just listening to respond, but listening to understand.
Yeah.
From both directions.
Yeah, when I hear you say that, I think of that word, psychological safety, from Amy Edmondson. She wrote a great book, The Fearless Organization, and that's what it's about, right? If you have psychological safety, everyone has a voice, right? And it's a non-judge voice. Everyone can state their opinion, right? And for us as coaches, we have to understand we do have to take that step back. We have to listen. We have to approach each conversation with this curiosity. What can I learn from this conversation? Because again, it's about getting perspective. And this is why, if you think about it, we have 2 eyes, 2 ears, and 1 mouth. My question is, as coaches, why do we use that 1 mouth too much, right? There's a reason why we have the 2 ears, the two eyes, like getting different perspectives, right? We might miss something in a game, but if we never have the courage or the vulnerability to ask our student athletes, we're never going to find the right answer, right? We just want to be right rather than getting it right. So It's one of those things like you're saying, listen to understand, listen with empathy, understand where they're coming from. And ultimately, we're trying to help our kids become better decision makers, right?
Yep.
Become better people, right? So if we're driving towards a player-centered environment, this is bigger than just, X's and O's. And I think we get so caught up in the X's and O's. And like the question I asked you, Jared, before we even went on air, it's like, at what cost do we want to win?
Yep. That's what it all comes down to, for sure.
Yeah.
It definitely comes down to that. And, and a lot of times it's pride. It's our own pride that stops us from doing all of these things, because we think, oh my gosh, if we lose games, initially or whatever, right, that's going to make me look bad.
Yeah.
And then we do the worst thing, which is take that on the kids, because they're making us look bad.
Right.
And then it's just a snowball thing, and it just deteriorates fast. But listening is the greatest form of respect, I think, that you can give someone. And you have to be able to model the behavior you want from them. If you want them to listen, then you have to also do the same thing, right? I remember Hoosiers. You remember the last play in the championship game of Hoosiers?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, the coach is talking to the team. He's saying, okay, we're going to use Jimmy Chitwood as a decoy. Everybody just at the same time put their head down. And he's like, what's wrong? What's wrong?
Yeah.
And they say, Jimmy turns to him and says, Coach, I'll make it.
Yeah.
And then everybody was just like so fired up.
Yeah.
And the coach at that time was like, yeah, you're right. Forget this. He got us here. This is the way we should go. And the players knew that's what should be done, and he listened to them.
Ultimate trust.
Yeah, exactly. That's just so cool to me.
Yeah.
That play, yeah. So.
Yeah, and one thing I just wanted to circle back on, Mike, you had mentioned this concept of rule of one. So can you explain to our listeners, like, what does that mean? What is the rule of one, and how does that actually build better connections? So a moment like that you're talking about in Hoosiers, like, you're going to trust Jimmy.
Right.
But what is this whole concept of
and
rule
because
of
of
one?
all the adversity they went through together, too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? There's another quote that I use every first day of practice: brotherhood begins in shared pain.
Yeah.
This is going to be tough. I mean, it's not just going to be everything's going to be great, and we're going to win every game, and we're never going to face adversity. That's just ridiculous to think that. So we know that by going through this together, though, we are going to become brothers.
Yeah.
Right? We're going to become that family in the true sense of the word, or what we even said before that is more than a family.
Yeah.
Right? And so.
So when you say family, I go back to this concept of rule of one. So how do we actually build more of this connection and actually become a family? Because we say it all the time, like, we're going to be a family. We're going to be a family.
And I would say that I did this even before there were phones because there weren't phones when I started coaching, because that was a long time ago.
Yeah, 64 years ago now.
And so making that connection with them, the rule of one is each day, make one comment to one player.
Yeah.
Okay. And now it's so much easier to do that. I would do that, especially after a loss, especially with my better players who had a tough game or what have you, and just to have them know that I cared about them enough that I wasn't just sitting in my own having my own pity party. Right. And that I reached out to them to say, hey, how's it going? No problem. Hey, we'll get them next time, and get back on there. We need you back tomorrow, focused, ready to go. There's plenty of the season left, whatever you need to say.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it's crucial to do that. And then, we all have these warm-ups at the beginning of practice. And I think that's also another time to kind of go in and out of them and kind of talk to them, just say little things to them. Doesn't matter anything. Hey, how's it going? How'd you do on that test today? Or whatever, Those really go a long way to creating those connections.
Yeah, and it's huge. It gets away from this whole concept of transactional relationships. I only care for you if you scored 20 points for basketball. Or I only care for you if you got the 3 goals in the game, right? Imagine a kid sitting at their house, 7 o'clock at night, and Coach Jared or Coach Mike sends a text like, I saw you going after that. I saw you working in practice today. Or, hey, I heard you did a great job on your math test.
Yep.
Like, think about that kid is going to show up the next day ready to run through the wall for you because you spent an extra 2 seconds of your day to send that kid and say, you know what, I see you, right? And that's what it all comes back to, this whole idea of this human nature. We all crave this stuff. We want to be seen. We want to be heard. We want to feel like we're valued beyond just a outcome or a performance or some type of result, right? And so just understanding that, like just intentionally, like Jared, you said earlier, intentionally building these connections, because again, if we master this software and this soft skills, guess what? The benefit is this hardware. We're going to see the better results. That's going to be the natural byproduct. But oftentimes I feel like we try to do it the opposite way. The command and control. This is how we're going to do it because I'm the coach and I said this is how it's going to work. But guess what? With this generation, that is not going to work.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the connection piece with us wanting to be so one-dimensional and getting results. It's such a prevalent problem right now because, like Coach Hibbs said, everybody's looking at it as the reflection of their abilities based on whether you win a match or lose a match.
Yeah.
And, okay, we're somehow doing something wrong. If we lose a game, we feel like we should have won. Or we're doing everything right because we won a match and it went really well, exactly. And so everything's over the moon. I think the more that we can step back as coaches and zoom out and think about what we're here for, whether you're at the club level, whether you're at the high school level, whether you're at the collegiate level. Ultimately, at the end of the day, until you're in the high-level collegiate game, it's not just about results. We need to be thinking about so much more. And I think that that's where one of the barriers lies with connection, is kids are afraid of failing their coaches. And so they are very closed up at the beginning.
Yeah.
And they are worried about disappointing. They are worried about not performing. They are worried about doing the exercise wrong.
Making
it's
mistakes.
because all they care about is pleasing in a lot of ways. And coaches misconstrue that desire for pleasing as being disconnected and keeping you at arm's length. Because we can convey that it's the most important thing at times if we're not very careful and intentional. And so I think a lot of times coaches need to zoom out and look at themselves more as life coaches that are working in a specific environment that we call sport that allows us to navigate different adversities, different obstacles, different challenges of time management, understanding why it's important to be to a practice on time, understanding why your teammates care that you're there on time, understanding how to talk to a teammate that maybe isn't putting the value and weight into the standards that we say we're going to abide by. There's so much stuff that we can talk about, learn about, improve ourselves as human beings before we should even be talking about an X or an O or a game won or a game lost. And so, what's his name? I'm blank. James Kerr with Legacy and one of my favorite books. There's this great quote. Stuart Lancaster, the current England rugby coach, told rugby writer Mark Reeson that if you established a culture higher than that of your opposition, you would win. So rather than obsessing about the results, you should focus on your team.
100%.
I mean,
100%. It's right there.
Put it all away for a second.
Yeah.
Put it all away and just focus on your kids.
Yeah.
And just focus on having a relationship with them and being there for them and giving them all the equipment that they need to go be successful people on the field and off of it. They'll love you for it. It can be so much deeper. You can have such a bigger impact on their lives. And they're going to look back at all of those times that they had tough things to go through, because we all go through them. And their coach is going to be one of those people that they remember that helped them get through whatever it was that it was tough.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time it had nothing to do with the game.
Yeah, and when I think of that, Jared,
Almost always.
Yeah.
Yep, you're correct.
here's one that to piggyback off of that. So this was a challenge posed from John Kessel. So John Kessel used to be the sports performance coach with Team USA Volleyball, and he always challenged coaches. He said, never be a kid's final coach.
Yeah.
Because you created the wrong environment and that kid walked away from that sport. So
Yeah.
understanding like the impact we have every day and how we show up for our kids and what is our intention? Are we really trying to develop these life lessons? Because again, we always say sports teaches life lessons, but we have to do it the right way. We never want to be that kid's last coach because we created an environment where it was hostile or fear-based, or we were just worried about the win at all cost mentality. And I didn't care anything about developing every single young man or woman that walks into my program. So
sure.
I think that's the challenge, is like never be a kid's last coach and understand the power of connection. I always say connection always wins. I don't care what the scoreboard says, connection is always going to win. So I don't know if you guys have any last thoughts
on
on
that.
that.
That never be kid's last coach. I mean, that would make me change my ways right away.
Yeah.
Because that like hurts me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It hits deep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it really does. And I'll go back to what my coach, mentor for Hall of Fame coach, Morgan Wooten, told us was the two things that everybody wants to hear is the sound of their name
Yep.
and a compliment. I mean, and if we take all of this, and we could even take it down to that bare minimum of just be that.
Yeah.
Just do that. Hey, Joey, great job today. I mean, and Maya Angelou says, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel.
Yep.
I mean, and that's the bottom line,
That's it.
right?
That's it.
If you want to be a coach in the 21st century, coach today with Gen Z, there you go.
That's it right there.
Yeah.
And as we wrap up here, guys, I was just wondering if you have any final ideas, any thoughts to leave with our listeners, our coaches, just anything else on connection.
The relationship is going to be the gateway for being able to teach what you're trying to get through to your athletes.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you want to connect with them, if you want them to understand the X's and O's, if you want them to understand how to play a position, how to get to things on time, you have to have the connection first, or
Yeah.
forget it.
And I would say you have to be genuine. It has to be genuine. They're going to see through it if you're just, following a list of instructions or something that you're doing. Oh, this is how I'm going to be a better coach. You have to make them feel it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think for me, guys, like my closing thought is just thinking about this is how we thrive just as humans, right? And building connection. We all want to belong to something bigger than just ourselves, right? So I always say, like, this is going to take time. We have to meet everyone where they're at, right? And it's going to take patience. But one thing I've learned is patience leads to potential. Once you see that potential, that leads to possibilities. So think about that. When we are patient with our kids, we're going to unlock their hidden potential. And when we unlock that hidden potential, guess what? We just open up a whole new door of possibilities, and that's what it's about. I know episode 1 we talked about, ask me in 20 years if I'm a successful coach. When we unlock those possibilities because of the connections we build and do things beyond ourselves and understand it's bigger than just the sport we play, then amazing possibilities happen.
Agreed, and so true about patience.
Yeah.
Because that's what's foiled by, of course, trying to win.
Yeah.
And result-based kind of coaching.
Yeah. So with that, I mean, I think the challenge to our coaches this week and to our listeners is work on your connections. Work through the rule of one, or bring the river into that, or listen with curiosity, be better listeners. So again, we really appreciate all our listeners.
And one more thing, try something new.
Try something new.
Each day.
Yep. Yeah, and make sure we're challenging ourselves just like we do our kids. So again, we appreciate y'all for spending for time for us, and we can't wait to dive into next week's conversation. So thanks again for being a part of the Being Champions podcast.